Well, I think it's time to cut some bigger rocks. Look what Highland Park sent me. This is their 14-inch slab saw, and so I'm going to be doing a review of that, and in the process, I'll be cutting some really nice Michigan rocks. I've got 5 Michigan rocks set aside. This is a pudding stone that I got at Mark Lewandowski's place. I did a video there, a couple videos there this summer. And this is a really big Petoskey stone that Sam found for me. He was working at the quarry here in Alpena this summer. He found this. I don't know about the quality of it. I won't know until I cut into it, but I'm excited to find out. And then I've got 3 other Michigan rocks. And I might even cut something a little bit more exotic. I haven't decided what I want to do for another rock yet, but I'm going to be cutting a lot of rocks. So the first thing I need to do is get the motor on this. I got it out of the box earlier. My friend Jason came over, and I was worried about how heavy it was going to be. With 2 people, it was really easy to get out of the box. The box actually kind of comes apart around the saw, so then you can just pick it up, and it was no problem at all to get it up here. So I just need to install the motor and the belt, and then I think I'm about ready to go. The motor comes shipped in a separate box because it's pretty heavy. There's a nice video on Highland Park's website on how to install this, but it's pretty simple. You just hang it off the back here, and there's just 2 screws that go in to hold it on. There's one. And let's see if I can get the other one in there. So this can slide left and right, and I'm just going to sort of center it for right now. And then I'm going to check the alignment of the pulleys. So I'm just using a carpenter square here. Make sure it fits flat on both of those. Go to the left just a little bit. Yeah, that looks good. We'll just tighten those up. You could also move the pulley on the shaft, so I just decided to do it this way since these screws were already loose. And I'm not going to tighten that up too much because I have to put the belt on next. So there's a couple to tighten the belt. There's a bolt right here. There's one on the other side too. So you just move that bolt, and that will let this swing in and out to tighten the belt. So I've got it pretty much all the way in right now. And they show you on the website how tight it should be. I think it should be maybe a little tighter than that, but you're not supposed to get it super tight. So I'm just going to adjust these, tighten this up, and then we'll take a look on the inside of the saw. Oh, I have to put a belt guard on too. Hold on. There's a belt guard. Just goes right over here. There's just 2 screws that put that on, so I won't bore you with that. Pretty straightforward. So I'm going to get this, get the tension right on this, and we'll take a look on the inside. Well, that couldn't have been any easier. Just 4 screws in a few minutes, and all that's installed. Next thing to do is install the blade. So this is a 14-inch diamond blade. I have 2 other 10-inch saws that cut rocks that are 3.5 inches tall. With a 14-inch blade, you're not going to be cutting 14-inch rocks, but I can cut a 5.5-inch tall rock. So significantly bigger rocks than I was cutting before. So let's take a look inside. Well, the first thing you probably notice is how unnaturally clean it is in here. It's kind of fun to see a rock saw that doesn't have sludge all over the place, although I think they're happier when they have oil in them. So this is the vise. This is where your rock goes. You just loosen these up, pick this up, stick your rock in here, and clamp it down. This whole carriage moves. There's a lever right here. You push this forward, and then the whole thing can slide back and forth. There's a video on the Highland Park Lapidary website where John shows how to adjust this. So there's 3 little bolts here. You use an Allen wrench to adjust them. And actually, in the video, this was underneath this, and it was kind of a pain for him to adjust. It looks like he's adjusted that back a little bit. So when I got this, I wiggled this around, and there was a little bit of movement there. So I just followed the instructions in his video. It was really easy to do. I just tighten these up a little bit, slid it back and forth until it felt good. It doesn't have any movement anymore, but it does slide nicely. So that's the way it's supposed to be adjusted. There's a crank here. When you turn this, this moves this whole thing back and forth. So you start with it moved off of this direction. I'm kind of standing at an awkward angle here to move it, but move it over this way. You get your rock in there. You take your first slice, and then you pull the whole thing back and you turn the crank so this moves this way a little bit, and then you can take another slice. You get really nice parallel cuts that way. One thing that I noticed about this compared to my Lortone saw is that it takes more turns of the crank to go the same distance. So on my Lortone, it was actually like 5.5 cranks to move at 1/4 inch, and you don't want to go half a crank, at least on my saw, because it was heavier on the top than on the bottom. So if you left that handle up, it wanted to tip around. Looks like this one has a little bit of a counterweight to it, so it probably isn't a problem here. But anyhow, I moved it 5 or 6 to get around 1/4 inch. On this one, you crank it 8 times. So what that tells me is you can get a little more precision. If you want it just a hair over 1/4 inch, you can accomplish that by just turning this, you know, a crank or whatever. What else do we want to look at in here? Oh, I was going to take this off, and then I noticed it's sealed around here, so I didn't want to take it off. But there are 4 screws to take this off. The bearings are underneath here. There's 2 bearings. And what's nice about these bearings, if you ever need to adjust them, you're going to loosen them up with some bolts, but then there's set screws right here and here. So you can take that and just move it a little bit back and forth, and that'll move your your blade angle back and forth, because you want the blade to be parallel with the movement of this, or else the saw is going to be trying to cut wedges, and that's not going to work. So if you ever have to adjust it, you don't have to take this off. There's little places right there you can get your Allen wrench in. You're going to have to, I assume, somewhere there's some bolts. Maybe you do have to take it off. Can you reach underneath there? Oh no, you can probably get to them right underneath. I'm not sure about that, but I do know that you can move these back and forth to make real minute adjustments and get that dialed in just perfectly. So let's get the blade on here. I already loosened this up. Oh, I made one mistake earlier. To get that nut off, it was a little bit tight, so I had to hold on to the pulley over here. So I had to take the belt guard off so I could hold the pulley and loosen up the nut. No big deal, because it's only 2 screws. So here's the blade. Gonna just slide that in here. Get it down there. Put this back on. And then the nut goes on. And I'm gonna have to grab my wrench and tighten that up. Won't do that right now, but you just hold on to the pulley here while you tighten that up. So I'll get that on, get some oil in here, and I think we're about ready to cut a rock. One more thing I wanted to show you inside here, and that's this little plate. This is not mentioned in the owner's manual, but I think I know what it's for. These are little grooves underneath here, so if you loosen these screws, you can move that left and right a little bit. I think what that's probably for is if you're cutting really thin slabs. Like I cut super thin slabs to make guitar picks, and they would fit in between the blade here, and they would drop down into the oil. I'd have to, move the carriage forward and dig around the oil to get them out. So I think when I'm cutting those really, really thin slabs, I'll loosen those 2 screws, slide that out a little bit right up close to the blade, and I'll be able to catch those slabs so they don't fall down in there. That's kind of a neat little feature. I'm going to save the Petoskey stone and the pudding stone for later, and this is going to be the first rock that I cut in my brand new saw. It might make a little bit of a mess because it'll make the oil a little bit red, but that's okay, that just happens. This is a conglomerate from the Keweenaw Peninsula. This is from a private mine tailings pile. I was there with the owner and he let me take a few pieces of it, but this has chrysocolla in it. So you can see what I did here in the past when I only had a 10-inch saw. I took an angle grinder and I went around the outside of it and then broke it so I could take off a smaller piece to put in my saw. The other saw would not hold a piece this big. This is almost 5 inches across the widest part here. So I'm gonna put this in my new saw and cut it up. That doesn't quite fit in there. Let's see, how big is that? That only opens up to about 4.5 inches. So let's see how much room we have over here. So this is, to the top of this red part here is almost 5.5 inches. But that's the maximum you could do is just under 5.5 inches, but the vise doesn't open up quite that big. Well, I guess instead of cutting it the way I wanted to cut it, I'm going to turn it this way. And we'll just take off some of that. These are going to come off in 2 pieces because of the way it's shaped here. I think I'll do it like that. I've got some wedges here because this is kind of angled down, so I think this will help hold the saw in there a little better. Whoops. Well, that one's oily now. That's okay, it's going to get oily anyhow. All right, something like that. So you want to make sure your rock's in there really, really well. So you want to grab it, make sure it does not move. You can even use pliers on these if you wanted to. That looks good. All right, so we're going to move it over that way a little bit. I'd be standing in front of this saw, except there's cameras there. Might be a little easier to turn this. A little bit tight to get your hand in there the way I'm doing it, but like I said, I think if I was over here it'd be easier. I just can't stand there right now. Kind of eyeballing it. Let's get a little closer. Move this forward, slide this up. We're not there yet. Looks pretty good. Around there. So you want to get it up close to the blade, but not quite hit the blade. I'm at the blade right now. There, now I'm back about, I want to be back just a little tiny bit. Right there. All right. Double check, make sure it's in there good. Okay, shut the lid. All right, so one thing I want to show you is this switch. So this is the on-off switch. Right now it's off. If I flip it this way, it'll be on. And you can see it's hooked up to here, and then that goes on a chain over to the vise carriage. So as the vise moves this way, there's a motor in here that powers it this way. It'll eventually pull that chain, and it'll pull this switch to the off position. What's nice about this saw is it has a button. So if I pull this way, I'm not going to do it right now because I've never used this before, but when I pull it this way, in theory, it should not turn on until I push that button. What happens sometimes with my old saw is this switch will pull part way and it'll be sticking like straight out. And then you open up the lid of the saw and you go to get your rock out of there or something, and you bump this and you turn it on, all of a sudden the saw turns on and sprays oil all over you. So this is a really nice little feature that you have to push that button to actually turn it on. Let's get this closed again. I'm going to flip this. It shouldn't turn on yet. And then when I push the button, it should go on. It'll be a minute, then we can hear the rock start cutting. There it goes. Oh. Once I broke a little chip off the rock. Here, engaging with the rock again. All right, I'm gonna let that cut, and we'll come back, and I'm guessing it's gonna take like half an hour or 45 minutes to go through that rock, and we'll come back and see how I did. The rock drop off, so we're done with the cut. It's gonna be a little misty in here. We're gonna take a look anyhow. All right, that's the second cut. They're coming off in pieces just because of the shape of the end of the rock there. Nice cut. Look at the saw oil, it's all green from the chrysocolla. So we got a bunch of little pieces. We'll get into some better stuff here hopefully pretty soon, in the next cut or two. Looks like I can get 2 more cuts before I hit my wedges. All right, so you pull the thing forward. We're going to turn this over for another cut. Slide it up toward the blade. Get to the other side here. Cameras are in the way. Actually, I don't think I need to move it very much. I think I'm gonna just cut it right there. I'm pretty close to the blade already. So, close this down, push the button, start another cut. Well, I cut the last slabs last night and I haven't taken them out of the saw yet. So you can see that will be the last one I'll get off of this because the wedges are going to be in the way at this point. The saw's not clean anymore, that's for sure. There's the slab that just fell off, and it looks like it cracked when it fell off. This stuff has some fractures in it, so I'm not surprised by that. But I want to show you what I do with the slabs once I take them out of there. I put them down into this stuff. This is called oil dry. If you drop oil on your garage floor, you can sprinkle this stuff around. It soaks up the majority of the oil. It looks a lot like kitty litter. I don't know how it's different or if it's different. So I already took a couple slabs out, but here's one of my end cuts. And what I do is just dump it in a bucket of water next to it here. Usually I put a little dish detergent in there just to kind of get a little more oil off of them. Here's one that's been in there for a few minutes. You can see the chrysocolla there. That's really cool stuff. People get some nice cabs out of there. This end, not so good. Oh, you can see that fracture right along there. That's when that other one dropped. It broke along that fracture. That's a pretty nice slab. I like that. Nice contrast. Good colors. All right, so I need to take that out, and I'll either reposition that for another cut, or honestly, I'm kind of excited. I might just cut something new now. So I'll show you what I put in next. Next rock up for slicing is this chunk of Kona dolomite. This is from Marquette, Michigan. It's a sedimentary rock. It's very soft. Works a lot like Petoskey stone. But this is in layers, so it's thinner this way. I could have put it in my old saw and cut it that way easily, but I really want to get these layers in here. So if I made a cab, I might have dark and light and top and bottom or something. So I want to cut it the long way here. There's a little chunk sticking up right there. So what I've discovered is that this blade sticks up higher than the vise goes. So if you have a rock that's angled up a little bit, you can get more than the 4.5 inches the vise holds. So I'm going to put that way, and I'm going to clamp it back here. This is a perfect rock for clamping. It's really flat on the top and the bottom, so it'll be pretty easy to put in the vise. Slide it in here like that. Trying to get this parallel with the blade so I don't waste too much material. Crank this down. And really tighten it as well as you can. And always grab the rock and see if you can move it. And that doesn't move. Okay, so then I need to slide it over. All right, this first one's going to be a little rough. I wouldn't normally be leaning over this way, but there are 2 cameras set up here and they're kind of in my way. So I'm going to try to take a cut like that. I'm going to mostly cut this end of it. This end kind of sunk in a little bit, so it's not going to catch right there except in the very top. That's okay. We'll come back and check on that in a few minutes. Well, not a few minutes, probably 25 minutes. Well, I already took the end cut off, so this is the second slab, and I think that's the only other slab I'm going to get off of here. I don't think there's quite enough room to get one more out of there without hitting the vise. Let's take a look at this. Isn't that pretty stuff? Sometimes it's more pink than this. This isn't as pink as some of the others, but it's still really, really, really pretty rock. Love this stuff. So you might be wondering, how do I cut the other part of the rock? I promise I'll show you that a little bit later in the video. But for right now, I'm going to put in that big pudding and stone and cut that up. I got that beast in there. It took a little finagling. It's kind of pushing the limits of the saw width-wise. So what I did is I took this whole top thing right off, set it over there, and that way I could drop the rock in from the top rather than trying to slide it in and miss this from one direction or the other. So that worked out really well. But when I put this end in on that side, it didn't fit. There wasn't enough threads on there to get the nuts on. So I just swung it around. I don't think there's a lot of jasper at this end, but I'm going to slice it up just in case. It's going to take off a fairly big chunk there, but if I shift it any more to the right, then it's in the way of that handle. So I didn't want to do that. So it's in there. Oh, one thing I'm pretty happy about is the distance from here to here. I'm going to get a lot of slices before I have to reposition the rock. In my other smaller saw, I only had about 2 inches that it could travel this way, and this one's like 4 or more inches. So that's going to be nice. All right, let's see how we did. As I suspected, you couldn't see any jasper on the outside of this. One little piece there. One little piece down in the corner there, so that was no good. First slab didn't have much of anything in it, but after a few slabs, it started to look promising on the bottom. And it just kept getting better on the bottom part of the slabs. I was starting to be afraid that there was never going to be anything on the top halves. So this is where I had to reposition. It was starting to look really good. But I had to take it out of the vise and reclamp it in the vise because I'd cut up to the vise. And at that point, I had to cut this wedge-shaped one just to straighten it up. There was no way to put it back in the vise exactly the same angle. So that happens. That's why it's nice to not have to reposition very often. And I got a lot of slabs before I had to do that. So one bad thing is that there were some, I don't know how that fits on there, but it came from there somehow. There were some fractures in this stuff, so a couple of casualties along the way. Look how nice that is. All the way to the top. Aren't those beautiful? And these are dry. I imagine they get polished up how they're going to look. Look at that one. That's probably my favorite slab. That is my favorite slab. And this one broke. But you know, I'd rather have a break now than after I make a pendant. So sometimes I look for the fractures, and I'll even like drop it a couple inches onto a counter or something to see where the fractures are. It's going to break anyhow. I may as well break before I make something out of it. And then I still have this left to cut up. So that's looking pretty good. And I told you I'd tell you how to deal with this, how to get this clamped in the, I could clamp a little bit here, but at some point there's not going to be enough to clamp in the vise to get the last few cuts. So what I do is I glue a 2x4 in the back. So this is that first piece of Kona dolomite I did. I can clamp this in the vise now and then take slabs off this side up to the 2x4. So that's a good way to deal with this. You can just use wood glue for this. I've used wood glue in the past. You don't want to use like Titebond 3 because that has, it's waterproof. And the way you get this off is you soak it in water. So with wood glue, you have to soak this, sometimes it's up to like 2 weeks before it releases. A lot of times it's a week, sometimes even a couple of days. But what I've been using lately, the last few years, is this stuff called water glass. It's also called sodium silicate. And you can just, this is a gallon jug of it, and I just stick a stick in there and like a honey dipper and just wipe it around in the rock and use that as a glue. The nice part about this is it releases when you set it in the water. It releases in usually a couple of days. So you can soak that off pretty quickly. Here's that other conglomerate with the chrysocolla in it. So that'll go back in for more cutting. So the next one up is Petoskey stone. So let's go back up to the garage and get that in the saw. Well, I have it in the saw. I got to tell you though, I'm pushing the limits of that vise. That is a pretty big rock for that vise. So, of course, I got the smaller end in the vise with the bigger end sticking out the front. And I want to show you something that I'm running a little bit of a risk doing. Got to get the camera down here where you can see. See this flange here? It's possible for the rock to go forward and hit that, and you don't want that to happen. The top of this is about the same height as the bottom of the vise, so you don't want your rock hanging down below the bottom of the vise. So let's go over and take a look at how I did. And you can see that it's definitely hanging down there a little bit. So I'm at risk of hitting that. But out here, it's a little bit higher. So I think I can get a couple cuts off of this. Plus, I moved it forward, and with the rock all the way forward, we'll make the complete cut. It doesn't have to go past the flange. So there's this little chain that I showed you earlier. You can adjust this. You just pull it out. It's in a little slot there. You just pull it out of there and adjust it. So while I was forward, I made sure that it was going to be able to turn the saw off. So I'm going to sit here and babysit this one, listen for anything going wrong, and if anything sounds bad, I'll just turn it off real quick. There's my cut. And you can see it didn't go quite all the way through because I didn't let it go all the way back, so it wouldn't hit that flange. So I broke it off. I was hoping it'd break a little bit higher, but it broke a little lower. I've already gone and washed this piece off and dried it off. And can you see how porous that is? And not good definition at all. And Petoskey stones usually get worse the farther you go into the center of them. They don't usually get better. I don't think I've ever seen one get better. So all of that's a huge Petoskey stone. It's kind of exciting. I'm going to stop cutting it right now because this stuff isn't really good for anything. Well, this is the heaviest rock I'm going to cut. It's not the biggest one. The pudding stone was bigger, but this is heavier. This is banded iron formation with specular hematite. So you can see the bands in there. I got this at Lindbergh & Sons Quarry in Marquette, same place I got the Kona dolomite, but I don't think this comes from Marquette. I think this comes from a quarry they have somewhere in the far western UP. I'm not exactly sure where. So this is gonna make a huge mess out of my saw. Whenever you cut something with iron in it, everything in the saw turns red. But hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. So this is going in next. This is gonna be super easy to load in there, perfect shape for putting in the saw. We'll take a look at it when it's done. If you thought the saw was dirty before, look at it now. Hematite makes a huge mess. I knew that was going to happen, but hey, sometimes you want to cut a pretty rock, you got to make a mess. So here's what this stuff looks like slabbed. This is dry here. Looks a little better wet. That's more like what it'll look like when it's polished. Unfortunately, almost all of the pieces split in half right along there. So I got these strips of bacon. If you look at this, you can see this one has a fracture right along there. There's also a fracture along there. I think it shows up better on this side. Maybe you can see it right there. So it's right along that line of hematite. So I don't actually know how good this stuff is for cabbing. It's pretty solid down here. If you look at the parts that didn't split, it looks pretty solid, but I don't think I've cabbed this stuff before, so I'm not sure. We'll find out. Anyhow, while we're talking about the mess that I've made, I thought I'd show you one other thing. This saw has a very nice drain plug right there. So my other saws didn't have that. And what I would do is just scoop the inside out with a little butter container, a little square Olivio was my brand of choice. And just scoop it out that way. Now I'll just be able to tip the back up and open that drain. And actually I'm thinking that I might put a valve on there so I don't have to take that plug out every time. I can just open and close the valve. So still thinking about that. And I promised you a more exotic rock that I'm gonna cut. I don't know if this is exotic, but it's not from around here, so I think it's kind of exotic. This is Mexican Wonderstone. and it's too big for my other saw. So now that I have a big saw, I'm gonna cut this. So this will be the last one for this video, but I plan to cut a lot more rocks with this saw in videos in the future. Well, I have to say that cutting up this Wonderstone has been just wonderful. I have a few pieces cleaned up, and I was surprised to see that it not only had the horizontal lines in it, but it also has these vertical lines in it, which make it even more interesting. And if you clink it together, it sounds neat. It's really glassy sounding. You just never know what you're gonna find inside rocks. Sometimes they're kind of what you expect, but other times there's surprises in there. So cutting rocks is just a fun hobby. I've had this saw for about a week now, and I've been cutting rocks pretty much nonstop in that time. And it's been really fun. I've been having a ball with it. It cuts really, really well. I only have two little tiny complaints about it. The first is the manual. It doesn't come with a printed manual, and that doesn't bother me. I'd rather just look it up online anyhow. But the manual has some mistakes in it. One of the mistakes is that on one page it says the vise opens up to 5.5 inches. Another page it says 4.5 inches. So at the beginning of this video, I said you can cut a rock up to 5.5 inches tall, and it's really only more like 4.5 inches. Now, if you can clamp a smaller end of it and it's bigger sticking out toward the blade, then you can cut a little over 4.5 inches, but the vise doesn't open up that far. The other thing is that I find it a little bit uncomfortable to get my hand in where the handle is to move the vise across. It's just a little bit tight in there. I've been working on different ways to hold the handle, and I'm getting used to it. So I think that's not going to be a problem for long. I think I just need to get used to it. Other than that, I love this saw. The motor's strong. It's got a 1/2 horsepower motor on it. That's not bogging down or anything. That last rock I cut is a pretty hard rock, I think, and it was pretty wide, and it has no problem with it at all. The cuts are super smooth. If you run your finger over them, it feels like it's polished almost. It's not quite polished, but it's very, very smooth. Very, very nice cutting saw. I like that it has this plug for the drain right here, so I can drain it right out a hole instead of scooping the oil out. It's never fun to clean a saw, so anything you can do to make it better is good. So I'll just put a 2x4 underneath the back of it, tip it up, and drain it out. A little squeegee inside, and it'll be pretty easy to clean this thing. I like the button here to start the saw, so I don't accidentally start it with the lid up. But speaking of the lid, there's all kinds of room in here when you put this lid up. You can get in there and move around. You're not squeezing into a little tight space. Pretty easy to put the rocks in the vise. Very easy, actually. The vise is held very well. It's just been a great saw. So thank you very much to Highland Park for sponsoring my video here and for sponsoring my channel. I do have a promo code for them. It doesn't work for saws, but it does work for accessories and rough rocks. I think grit is included in that. You'll have to try it out. So that's in the description of the video, so go check that out. And thanks again to Highland Park, and I'll see you next time.